Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're letting people in. We've had quite a few signups, and so it may take a minute or two, but we will make it worth your while, I hope. We're having trouble with one of our speakers. He's in Maui, and we're having a little difficulty getting him in, but we've got two great participants already. So we'll get started in just a second as we get more people in. Okay. Real quickly though, we've got a bunch of questions that came in ahead of time to Lori. So if you have your question here, we've already got it. If you think of a question while we're talking, jot it down. Lori's going to monitor the Q&A, and we're going to then answer as many questions as we can, depending upon our time here. So we're almost at 200. So we're going to just see another 1 or 2 minutes, guys, and then we'll get started. Okay. Ed, are you here? Are you in California or Tennessee?
I'm in Tennessee at this moment, but I'll be back in California next week.
I'm coming back in early January for a week, and then again in February for some live stuff. So I want to stay away from California until after they initiate the new RPA, so there won't be too many explosions.
Yeah, that's just moments away, isn't it?
The 14th of December.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get those contracts written now while you still can.
Well, I thought that initially they said they were going to issue the contract out on, I think it was the 20th of December. That was the first announcement. Then they advanced it a week to the 14th. But then you got 90 new forms just, 11 days before Christmas. So it's going to be.
That reminds me, John, somewhere in here asked me a question about the RPA then on the MLS, because there's a good add-on for that.
Okay, we'll get, like I said, we're going to go through as many of these questions as we can. A lot of them are not really related to the MLS. We had questions about, why are they changing the contingency period and some things like that. So we'll cover all that. So Lori, we're exactly at 200. So if it's okay with you, we're going to get started because I know these guys have just a ton of work or a ton of things to say. If Larry does come in, just, include him and he'll jump right in. So good morning, everybody. This is John Giardinelli, and this is a very special edition of John's Rants. As you know, most of the time, my rant is on one topic over about a 20 to 30 minute period. But today, we're going to cover something that I think is incredibly important. And that, of course, is your multiple listing service. There's just been so much going on. We've had issues with the Department of Justice, issues with the Federal Trade Commission. We've had issues with class action lawsuits. You've had concerns over the future of the multiple listing service and the future of associations. And all of that is not in addition to issues that have been facing the market for the last 6 months regarding the conduct of agents, lack of cooperation, waiving contingencies, all of those kinds of things. And so what Lori and I wanted to do was to have a special rant specifically dealing with the multiple listing service. And I didn't feel, frankly, that I was the one to hear from, although I have opinions. I think that it would be best to hear from the three speakers that we've put together. Again, just to introduce them, we have Larry Black, who has not yet arrived. Hopefully he'll be here fairly soon. And Larry is a member of the board of directors at Tri-Counties. He's a president-elect next year for Tri-Counties. He's also, more importantly, on the board at CRMLS and has had many, many years of service to organized real estate. Larry is a broker and has just tremendous amount of knowledge. We have Stephen Meade. Stephen is a past president of Pacific West. He's currently a member of the board of directors at CRMLS, where he serves as their treasurer in addition to his duties as a director. He is also a broker. He is like I said, a past president of Pacific West. He's also, as is Larry, a CAR director, and both of them attend the NAR meetings. I believe Larry is a voting director. Stephen, I'm not sure if you are, but I know you attend those meetings. And then we have Ed Zorn. I've been practicing law I told Ed already I was going to say something nice about him and not to let it go to his head, but Ed, I've had the pleasure of both working with Ed in the same law firm and have been working in conjunction with Ed since I represent a number of the associations that are part of the MLS. Ed is the chief counsel and vice president of CRMLS, which I believe, Ed, is the largest multiple listing service now in the United States, if not in the world. And I got to tell you, he's also a broker, a lawyer, obviously. And in all my years of practicing law, in the 44 years I've been practicing law, in my personal opinion, is one of the finest lawyers I have ever met, both intellectually as well as morally. So I'm excited to have the three of them with us. Couple of quick announcements. I've given Ed full permission, and I'm also going to be very carefully watching issues relating to antitrust and anything dealing with boycotts, because obviously we need to be careful to protect everyone in that regard. As I mentioned before, Lori is going to be monitoring questions. Larry, welcome aboard. We just introduced you. Aloha. And so we're going to be real careful about some of the stuff that's going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just jump into the first question, and then we'll see where we go for there. So I think I'm going to ask Ed to get started on this, if you don't mind. And the National Association of Realtors has been at it with the Department of Justice now for quite a while. And at their recent convention in San Diego, they adopted a number of new rules. Now, Ed, you saw it coming, frankly, from what I can tell. And CRMLS has already started putting those rules in place, and some of them have been there now for a while. So tell me about what NAR did. Tell me about what CRMLS's anticipatory response was, and then what you intend to do coming forward. And then, of course, the two directors can have their comments as well.
Sure. Thanks, John. And again, thanks for the opportunity to jump in and participate in a John rant. They've always looked like fun. So thanks for inviting Larry and Steve and I to the party. And so, focusing specifically on what happened at NAR in San Diego, I do happen to sit as a voting member of the NAR MLS Issues and Policy Committee, and focusing on the DOJ issues. So a little bit of history here. And I'm going to go way back history. So back in 2008, actually a little bit before that, NAR had passed some rules. Remember, this is the beginning of sharing information and listings on the internet. NAR had passed some rules that limited what kind of information you could share on your websites from other brokers and other agents. And as a result, the Department of Justice got involved, filed some lawsuits. And the result of that was a 10-year consent decree that in essence created what we now refer to as the IDX and Internet Data Exchange and the VOW, Virtual Office Website rule sets. Those were created as a result of a DOJ lawsuit and a settlement. That consent decree expired in 2018. And almost immediately, the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission started looking into competition in real estate and why were commissions still where they were and these types of things. They convened a panel, and Art Carter, our CEO of CRMLS, had the privilege of participating in that panel. In preparing for that event, Art and I spent over 5 hours in conversations with attorneys from the Department of Justice and Federal Trade Commission, getting kind of a feel and a sense of where they were going and what their concerns were. Now, fast forward here, a couple of years since that event occurred in Washington, D.C. About a year ago, the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against NAR and immediately filed a settlement agreement with that. So clearly NAR and the Department of Justice have been negotiating, honestly, since the time of this conference that happened about 2 years ago, on what rule changes could NAR make to enhance competition in real estate. And the DOJ was focused on a couple of rules. We know over the summertime, with changes in administration and some changes of some players in the Department of Justice and an unprecedented move, the Department of Justice backed out of that settlement agreement. Very, very unusual, almost never done, and reinstituted their investigation into NAR and the practices specifically with regard to how agents are compensated and information being exchanged are the two topics. And so what NAR did at this most recent NAR meeting is they went ahead and moved forward with 3 of the 4 points of the settlement agreement that had previously been agreed to. These are things that NAR think is good for the industry no matter what. The first one is that there is not going to be a requirement with the MLS that we're going to be required on any public-facing pieces of information out of the MLS, so public-facing websites, to require the disclosure of any offer of compensation that the listing side makes to the buyer side. Okay. And in addition to that, we are going to permit and include in our internet data exchange feed, the IDX feed. And this is the information that you use if you're operating a website where you show listings and consumers can come and search listings. You're going to be able to, at your option as a broker, you don't have to, but you will be allowed to display that compensation. This is honestly something that CRMLS already implemented last spring. So it passed the NAR MLS committee, passed the NAR board of directors. It will become a policy of NAR starting in January 1st of 2022, with implementation required by March 1st of 2022. But frankly, CRMLS has already been doing this since the spring of 2021. We believe at CRMLS, and the board voted to enhance transparency and to allow this full viewability of what's happening with compensation with regard to the commission. And with that, I think maybe I'll turn over to either Stephen or Larry to see if they have any thoughts or comments as voting members at CRMLS, about this policy.
I'll start, and 2 things. I think for us, this was a big move, but this wasn't. We weren't the first MLS in the country to do this. In fact, it had been implemented up in the Seattle area for a while, and I think the expectation and the fear of a lot of brokers was that this would turn the world upside down, and it turns out that is not what happened there at all, and it's not what happened here. But what I found fascinating was sitting in that room at the NAR policy meeting, some of the comments that were made by members in that committee, who were arguing that it will turn this industry upside down if consumers know how much buyers agents are getting paid. And I have to chuckle. I mean, number one, well, sellers have known how much the listing agents been getting paid, since the beginning of listing agreements, and this argument that this would upend the industry, I thought, it made me realize it passed, not by a huge margin, mind you, by a moderately narrow margin. It made me realize, I think as an industry, we still have a lot of work to do. And, CRMLS is a very progressive organization that I think is at the forefront of these changes, but there are a whole lot of players around the country that I think are kind of kicking and screaming and are going to be dragged along with some of these changes.
Larry, any comments?
Yeah, and I tend to agree with Stephen. And sitting in that boardroom at CRMLS, we see this in the discussion that was had in there was robust, needless to say, and but the unmasking of the commission, and open competition was seen to be the right thing to do. And as Stephen pointed out, it's not unprecedented. Other MLS systems have done this, but there are that fear factor that this is going to change circumstance, or I think more importantly, people internalize that was going to affect their business in doing this. And I think that has been proven not to be the case. So as a practitioner in the field, this open transparency, I think, is healthy for it. It is not coming back as a backsplash to us. It is just healthy competition that we have. There are so many models and so much change that is in the air and has always been. It's just happening at a little more rapid pace in this technology world that we live in. And with us being on, if you look back in the where Ed was talking about how the DOJs come in, we have been under the microscope in other areas too. In the lending practices with TRID in 2015, we've been under the microscope. So it's not unusual or not unexpected that we were going to be looked at here as well. And so luckily CRMLS has been proactive. They've gone ahead and made those changes that we deem necessary, and I think is appropriate in here.
And in terms of other rules, they also adopted a rule regarding limitations on the use of the term free as it applies to the buyers, and also they passed some lockbox rules. Or did they not pass?
They did not. No, I can go through the other ones they did.
Okay,
Let me pick up.
Go ahead. I was interested also in the limitation that CRMLS has placed, which is now, as I understand it, a rule at the NAR level regarding searching by compensation only, which I've always thought is a fiduciary duty issue of monumental proportions. So why don't you guys just tell us a little bit about what you guys have done, and then we can see if there's any other comments, and we'll jump into something that I'm sure we'll all have some fun with, which is, where we go with all this and what really is the end game with Department of Justice and so forth. So go ahead and comment on those issues first, and then I have another question I want to ask you.
Just finishing up the commission issue. I see we had a quick question here from Rebecca. Just clarifying what we're talking about. What we're talking about here, as far as exposing the compensation, it is the offer of compensation going to the buyer's agent only. It is not the total compensation. The MLS, at the MLS level, we have no idea what the total compensation is. We do not allow that. In fact, we have a rule that prohibits it. That is, again, for antitrust purposes. We don't want to be displaying what the total compensation is in the MLS, because that could be argued to be price fixing, right? That we don't want listing agents to say, hey, look, these other 5 firms are charging this particular percentage, so you should pay the same. We don't want that to be happening. So what we're talking about exposing here is the buyer's agent compensation going to the buyer side. And the idea and rationale, again, behind that is that buyers do participate, right? This gets wrapped up in the price of the home, and the buyers are paying some level of this fee. And so that's why the DOJ and the consumer advocates are saying this should be something that the buyers know at the very beginning of the transaction, what is their participation in the payment of commissions. So going to your next question, the other 2 policies that come kind of from the DOJ that NAR passed was one that kind of, not one that I'm super favorable of at the MLS level, because to me, this is more a code of ethics issue. And that is under Article 12, under the standards of practice, NAR permitted real estate realtors to say our services are free to the extent that someone else was paying that compensation to them, right, rather than the exact client that they were working with. My understanding is that has also been changed at the code of ethics level, and they took the additional step of making it an MLS rule. So NAR is asking us as MLSs to implement a rule that says MLS participants and subscribers must not represent that their brokerage services to a client or customer are free or available at no cost to their clients unless, so there's a caveat here, unless The participant or subscriber will receive no financial compensation from any source for those services. So if you do a truly free CMA or broker price opinion or some kind of valuation, right? That is not covered by this rule. That can still be free as long as you truly receive no compensation. What you're not allowed to do is tell a buyer, hey, go ahead and use my services, pay me, I will get you into properties, I'll help you negotiate the deal. And hey, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, you don't have to pay me anything because the seller is going to pay me. That is not allowed because frankly, that's not true. Right.
And that has historically been an Article 12 issue. And so now it seems like there's an even playing field with any realtor or anybody that's not a realtor joining the MLS. And it's much clearer now. That doesn't mean that Stephen, Larry, any of the people that are listening in cannot offer their services pro bono. I mean, lawyers do it, other people do it. You can work for free. But what you cannot do is mislead that you're working for free when in essence you're being paid from the sellers through the listing agent's commission. And I got a question for you. When we send out the request for information, particularly at the people that understand what's going on in organized real estate, there's this issue with homes.com. And
hey, John, can I finish because there was another,
I'm sorry.
There's more to the answer for this last question before we jump to homes. Sure. No problem. And first of all, I'd like to turn over to Stephen and Larry, see if you guys, from a broker perspective, I'd be curious to know what the impact is on this model of free. Like, is this something you guys did routinely? Did it not really matter because you already talked commission? Like, how does this impact you at the broker level?
I know for me, I didn't ever advertise, my services as free, and my basis was maybe not quite the same reasons for NAR not wanting to be labeled free. I mean, I did it on the basis that I think it devalues your services as a buyer's agent when you tell people they're free. The subtext here, and I think where they're going, and mind you, this is my personal opinion, not necessarily an official CRMO's position of any type, is that when there's a house and you negotiate a price of say $1 million, right? That part of that element incorporates those commissions, and those fees are part of that price, and that's the reason why that it's not paid by the seller. The reality is that the buyer is paying some portion, right, of that commission just indirectly through the price of the house. And I think that's really the basis of kind of acknowledging that sort of reality of our business. Just because the buyer didn't write a check for it to their agent doesn't mean that they didn't participate in some portion or form of that commission payment.
Larry, any further comments?
And I think that this sounds much more convoluted than what it is. And the boots on the ground, the realtor on the ground, and practitioner, the offering of free services. I'm going to sell you this house, or I'm going to represent you on this house, and I'm going to do this for free because the seller's paying it, I think is a smaller area of concern that of numbers that do that. I think the in a world where I'm getting the questions are you saying I can't give a broker price opinion, or I can't give a opinion where that I am perceived as getting some compensation for it when I truly am not getting it. I think it's clear. I think Ed made it clear that is not something that is covered by this aspect. Whether if when you're doing a evaluation for a bank, I think you just need to make that a little more transparent, that yes, if that is an occupied house and I'm doing a broker price opinion, I'm getting paid for that. It's not for them, it is for the bank. Just make sure those things are clear.
Definitely.
Again, go ahead. I just was going to suggest that it's now nice because we have very specific rules. Article 12 is very clear. All of your real estate communications are to be truthful. Those were misleading. A half truth is not truth. So I think this is a good thing. I don't think it's going to have a major impact on but it's gonna make the industry look better to the public. And there was one other change that had to do with something you guys have already done, had to do with search by compensation only.
Correct, right. And so the last kind of NAR approved rule that dealt with these DOJ issues, exactly what you had referenced, John, that was the ability to search by compensation, right? The idea that I can do a search inside the multiple listing service as a buyer's representative and save that search so that any property that then came into the MLS was inputted would automatically be sent to my client. And the ability to have a field that says, you know, not under 2% or at least 2% commission or at least 2.5% or 3% or 10%, right? Whatever number you decide to put in there, right? And that way you would be limiting the exposure of listings to a client based on a level of compensation. That is no longer available, right? We have stripped from the MLS search fields the buyer's compensation level, right? So you can't search by compensation. You can't save a search and limit what the computer sends to your client because of a certain level. We've also removed in one of our front-end platforms, Matrix, you had the ability to search or not search something, right? There was a little radio button that you could click that said not. We've removed that from the listing agent, listing brokerage firm. So same thing, you can't do a search and then put not a listing from Stephen Meade, right? But the thought was, if there are certain brokerage firms or agents that offer some kind of discounts or something, you didn't want to exclude those from searches. So those are features, again, I think in the springtime, maybe the end of the winter, we had already eliminated those abilities. So from a CRMLS perspective, there's really nothing for us to do. It's already been like that in your MLS systems that you've been operating under with CRMLS. And I think we've received zero complaints or calls on that issue, going to, I think, one of Stephen's earlier points, I think that you were making, Stephen, on when we made and Larry, when we made this change about exposing buyer side compensation. It hasn't impacted the business of real estate in any kind of meaningful sense. So this is another one of those that we eliminated it. I think most people, John, didn't even know we took it away, right? Because we did some research in response to one of the earlier inquiries that the DOJ had on one of our vendors. And what we found is that field we had 250,000, put that number in context, 250,000 saved searches in the CRMLS system. Less than 1.5% ever touched the compensation field. Right. So from a practical sense, this is a field that almost nobody was using anyway. So we got rid of it. And again, not a big impact, because of that.
One of the concerns that from a risk management perspective was that a lot of people that were utilizing this, and again, it's 1.5%, but it's still a number of people, was that you basically saved them from their own breach of fiduciary duty. Because if all you're searching is by compensation, you are essentially not putting your client's interest first, you're putting your own first. And if that were discovered by the Department of Real Estate or by a civil practitioner, plaintiff's lawyer, that could end up becoming very problematic. So you guys have any comments on this last issue? If not, I want to jump into something that Barbara Betts brought to my attention and Larry brought to my attention. And I know, Ed, you've had meetings regarding this issue. And then I want to jump into the elephant in the room, which is the future of the compensation model. I want to get your guys' thoughts on that. So let go ahead. Larry, do you have a comment? And then Steve on what Ed just talked about?
Yeah, John, let me just go back to Ed's comment, because sometimes these issues are more complicated than really what they are. They just present themselves that way. When we talk about the search and what Ed was talking about, you cannot search, exclude an agent. That does not change the fact that if you're looking for a particular product, a particular unit, that you can use the agent's number, MLS number of that, and search that. We did not take that.
Right.
That's still available to you. So I don't want anyone confused that this is only, you cannot exclude somebody on a search.
All right, then I want to touch on this home.com issue that both Linda and Larry brought up. Just Ed, because I know you had some meetings with those folks at the NAR meeting, and to the extent that you can, I understand there may be some things you're not capable of talking about or able to talk about. What's going on with that whole issue, because there's been some controversy. So if you could explain that, and then I'm going to be asking you guys about your thoughts on the whole compensation model and where this is all headed.
Sure. So we have had an unprecedented level of investment in the real estate technology space, and it's been huge, right? At the local broker level, you may have seen the articles and the impact, and maybe even made some decisions on how you use those products that CRMLS offers because of some of these purchases, right? You had Compass buying Glide, which was a vendor of CAR and a vendor of CRMLS. You had Zillow, which is a broker participant inside of CRMLS, acquiring Showing Time, which again is a vendor product of CRMLS's. And so there's some layers of complication when you have broker participants who now own some of these companies, and there's a fear that kind of comes up with, hey, who's now seeing the data and that kind of information? One of the other large acquisitions that has occurred over the last year is that a company called Costar. And just to put this in context, Costar has been in the real estate space for a few decades. They are dominant. They are the dominant player in moving information about listings and comps on the commercial side across the country. They have a nationwide platform. They are a $38 billion company. That's a billion with a B, right? To put that in context, if I were to look Zillow up, I don't know, is Zillow still worth more than 20 billion, right? So they're probably double the value of what Zillow's worth, right? Just to put that context and scale on the table. They acquired a product called HomeSnap, and HomeSnap is a communication tool, a search function that our agents use. It's a product that CRMLS offers out to our membership. It has a very strong public-facing web presence, and they bought HomeSnap. And then about 4 months ago, they also acquired a company called Homes.com. Homes.com is also a syndication vehicle that CRMLS sent its listings to. Now, since it is a syndication site, what that means is you as a broker have the ability to turn off your listings going to Homes.com. Well, you go to your syndication selection tools and you'll see some levers there. Realtor.com is also a syndication site that you can turn on or off if you want. Homes.com's model over all these years has always been that they included the listing agent's contact information, and all of the leads would go to the listing agent as well as to a couple of advertising agents. So Homes.com's model previously was you'd look at a listing, you would see the listing agent with the listing agent's contact information, and then below it would be a couple of other paid advertising buyer type agents. And when someone filled the lead form out, it would go to all of those, right? So listing agents were able to get leads off of this site in addition to being paid for leads. What Costar has done is they're going to a kind of a marketing pitch that says you're listing your lead. And so they have stripped away all non-listing agent advertising off of their website. No mortgage advertising, nothing like that. So all leads would go only to the listing agent. That's the kind of the classic Costar model of how they built their presence on the commercial side. And now they're bringing that to the residential side. And just keep in mind, what this means is you have a giant multi-billion-dollar company with all of the technical resources, development resources, and marketing resources available Now in the residential space, I've been predicting for a few months since this acquisition was announced that I believe that Costar will spend over $200 million in advertising in 2022 to advertise homes.com. You will see it on Facebook. You will see Super Bowl commercials, all of them advertising and trying to drive traffic to the homes.com experience, where only the listing agents will be the people who could be contacted through that website. So that's a little bit of a background, John, with regard to homes.com. Again, I'd open up to Stephen and Larry to see what your thoughts are, being brokers who maybe utilize the services or lead generation of that company.
For the last 30 years, I've heard this product or that company is going to make the realtor obsolete. And again, you're hearing that kind of chatter with all these new products and services. And of course, none of it's happened. And in fact, statistically, people are using real estate professionals at a higher level than ever before. So when you guys hear this from a broker's perspective, what is your reaction when you hear Ed talk about these new products and you discuss them at the CRMLS level? Steve, comment?
I think for me, and Ed's repeated it, I think 4 times there, is that they are a $38 billion company. And I think that, to me, that's the difference. I'm also the kind of person, Costar threw a gigantic party at NAR, the likes of which no vendor has ever thrown at the NAR convention. And, I'm the kind of person who likes to know who's buying the drinks and where the money's coming from. So, my immediate thought in this is, this feels like that after school special, right? Where there's the guy, the sketchy guy lingering around the playground offering free tastes, doesn't cost anything, and I'm wondering, when's the other shoe going to drop and how are they going to try to monetize this? But to me, nobody has ever been this well resourced to be able to make big changes. And I don't even want to say that these are negative changes in our business. I think that there are 2 things that I've learned about realtors that I think have held true over time. Number 1, realtors hate change. Number 2, realtors as a group are extremely resilient. Even if they go kicking and screaming, this is an industry that has probably pivoted in the last 30 years 10 times, right? I don't think any other industry can say that. So on one hand, I'm sort of curious to see how their model is going to develop, where the money is going to come from. And, some agents will be able to take advantage of them as a player in the space. And some agents, their current models, if they don't change, will lose. I think you kind of have to have a sense of professional curiosity when you're looking at some of these big industry changes.
Are there any other comments? Because Stephen just gave me my perfect transitional pivot. And so
I do have a response though to that too, though, John. So before you transitional pivot, let me have a
okay,
chance.
Well, Larry, do you have a comment, and then I'm gonna jump back to Ed.
Okay, well, I think it was well said. Stephen articulated it well. Let's bear in mind that CoStar, as Ed said, has been around for a long time. And I believe they've also acquired apartments.com. So they're closing in on the relationships that we have on our vendors. But it is also understand us that subscribe to CoStar, we pay a significantly higher for that MLS vehicle than what we as a realtor might be with CRMLS. So there's a drastic difference in price point between the two. And I constantly indicate that CRMLS is a bargain at that price. So,
Ed, you had a further comment?
Yeah, John, the second part of your question was, what I did have an opportunity to meet with about an hour with CoStar with regard to their homes.com and HomeSnap products, because we do have contractual relations with that, relationships with them. So this is what I can tell you, right? They have represented to us that, and I think you're going to see this in their marketing pitch, right? They're not going to be a broker. They're not going to be an iBuyer. They're not going to be an MLS.
Okay.
And like most people who tell me those things, I don't believe a damn thing they say. So now I'm going to leverage that. I'm going to push them into agreements that force them in writing to protect that as best I can on behalf of CRMLS. But I'm just telling you, that's what they're doing now. I think they have a giant uphill battle, and that is the your listing, your lead concept. While listing agents scream, clamor for it, demand that that's the only way any lead should happen, is generally speaking a very bad consumer experience. And this is exactly why homes.com didn't do well before. The dirty little secret that's out there, and this is from every company I've ever seen statistics on that match it, that give leads, free leads to listing agents. 80% of listing agents that get a lead not paid for do not communicate or contact a lead within 24 hours of getting it. That's a terrible consumer experience. So while that's great for the listing agent, for the 20% that have some kind of machine or lead capture system set up, if I'm a consumer and I want to talk to somebody about a property, and I fill out a contact form, I leave a message, and no one contacts me within 24 hours, I don't want to go back to that website. I want to go somewhere else, right? So that's a problem that Costar and homes.com is going to have to solve for this. I don't care how much money they pile into it. If the consumer experience is bad, they're going to have a problem, right? And they're aware of that dilemma. I have not heard about how they're going to solve that problem yet. And you know, time will tell if they're able to kind of crack that nut, but that's a challenge for them.
So we've got the Department of Justice reneging on a settlement. That's my words, not necessarily, but it is historic. To my knowledge, according to Katie Johnson and what I've been able to, I haven't been able to find one time where this happened, particularly after all the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted. But you have the Department of Justice wanting to reopen the investigation into the business practices of organized real estate. You've got a multiple of class action lawsuits attacking both the seller's side in the way you price your listings and how you charge for compensation, claiming that the seller shouldn't have to pay the buyer's commission and costing billions and billions of dollars on the seller side in a class action lawsuit. Now you've got buyer lawsuits saying somewhat the same thing. You've got the Federal Trade Commission. I know President Biden just unleashed them on the oil industry to apparently try to create another bad guy to take people's minds off of certain things. And of course, we all know that, well, we don't all know, but Ed, you know, that the Federal Trade Commission, unlike the Department of Justice, doesn't necessarily have to go through the courts to get things done. So you've got all of that, and it's all focused, not exclusively, but primarily on the compensation model that has been historic in organized real estate. And I believe I'm correct in that basic statement. My question is this, is then if in fact NAR starts to realize that the compensation model needs to change, first of all, is that something that's potentially out there that over the next decade, there's going to be a significant shift in the way the compensation model is put together, both through the MLS and otherwise? And if so, then what's it going to morph into? What will it look like? And of course, then we can get into conversation about how that will impact agents, members, and of course, the public. So first question, I guess, is do you see, based on all of this, significant potential problems with maintaining the current compensation model? I'm going to jump to Ed first because I want to hear his opinion. Then I want to hear the two of your opinion on how that might impact brokers and your agents.
So the fast answer is yes. That is completely
Thank you for appearing
squarely,
today, ladies and gentlemen. We're so grateful. Go ahead, Ed.
right. So when we talk about the multiple listing service, you probably have always heard the phrase, the MLS is about compensation and cooperation, right? And we've always used those two terms together. And that concept there is in cooperating with one another and sharing this information, one of the things we do is we have this offer of compensation from the listing side, the listing agent, listing brokerage firm, to a cooperating buyer's brokerage firm, right? And that the seller enters into one big commission amount, and then the listing broker, based upon the agreement they have with the seller, then offers some portion of that to the other side. And that's how compensation of the two sides happens. Now, the huge benefit for the industry is by burying the compensation into the sales price, it also means we get to bury compensation into the loan. And it means that buyers who are paying compensation don't have to come in with a big check or a big piece of cash, in addition to all the other costs it takes to buy a home. And that, if you will, helps the entire process work. That model of seller negotiating with a listing broker and the two of them getting to decide how much money a buyer broker gets paid is what's under attack. And it's squarely under attack. And I can tell you, in my conversations with the DOJ and the FTC in preparing for, Art Carter for his presentation at that workshop on competition in real estate, that was a major focus. And I can tell you, in backdoor conversations, talking with attorneys across the country in the MLS space with ties into the DOJ and FTC, that is absolutely what they're coming after. And it is my opinion that one of the reasons they backed out of the settlement agreement is it didn't go far enough in dealing with this compensation model. And John, the only thing I would say about your comment or question, you talked about 10 years. We need to start be talking about closer to 10 months, right? Or 1 to 2 years of what's going to happen. And what is NAR's role in that? NAR has been aware of this issue for 2 to 3 years, right? And you see one strategy they had, which was almost successful, by the way, right? In cutting a deal with the DOJ and trying to have that, deal with it in that fashion. And now that's been upended. So now the question is really in the hands of the NAR leadership of what are they going to propose, right? I think the reality is the real estate agent needs to get ready for a period of time coming very quickly where sellers pay listing agents and brokers and buyers will directly pay buyer agent and brokers. I think as an industry, our primary concern, our primary lobbying, where we need to put some energy and effort, is making sure that no matter what rule comes down or how this changes, that the buyer side can still wrap up any compensation into some kind of loan, just like they do today. That will be critical to keep the system flowing without too much disruption. But that unquestionably is the direction that this will head and will happen.
The 10-year comment was to tee it up for you.
I know.
We've had this conversation before. All right, so I personally agree with everything that Ed just said. We've had this conversation before. We had this conversation, Stephen, at your retreat for Pacific West. And Larry, I know you guys have had this conversation on a deep dive over at Tri-Counties as well. So if Ed's wrong, which I don't think he is, then we go on like we have been for 1.5 million years. But the reality is something's going to change. Some significant changes are going to take place. And I'm not sure how that's exactly going to look. I don't think anybody is, but it's going to look different. If that's true, then Stephen, how does that impact from the lawyer's side? Obviously, there's going to be a lot going on, but from the broker's side and from their agent's side, and Larry, then this question goes to you as well. What ends up happening in the market where you've got buyers now trying to figure out how to hire their own agents and how they're going to come up with the money to do that? Obviously, sellers are going to they're going to be getting different kinds of offers. Right now, the market's pretty hot for them, but we all know that'll change over the course of time. And so how does this look to you guys in terms of how this might morph?
I have some slightly different views than Ed. I think Ed has a very rational, logical ideological version of how this is going to work out. And my experience has been that it's great to think about that, and that might be the eventual place that things settle. But I think that disruption period is going to be a little weird. I think we're going to see situations where compensation may not be allowed to be offered in the MLS, but there's going to be an unwritten rule of what certain people expect to negotiate in contracts, much like commercial deals. I can see this going in a lot of kind of maybe messier directions. I think something that Ed doesn't talk about, and that I think everyone on this call really needs to hear and understand, is this. In the last 5 to 10 years, I think we've had what I would call sort of a listing agent revolution in terms of adding value to clients. I think the way top listing agents service their listings is completely different now than it was 10 years ago. Take a look at the photos in the MLS. Walk by an open house from a top agent. I think you see that as soon as there were a lot more discount players in the market, I think in our competitive markets like Southern California, I think the top agents said, I don't like eroding commissions. We need to step this up and add more value. I'm waiting for that revolution to happen on the buy side, and I don't think it's happened yet. And I think agents need to understand that compensation, not being visible to consumers and being sort of guaranteed, I think that really allowed kind of a stagnation of adding value to the transaction. And so what I think is going to make a very big change is, our industry has a lot of organizations that exist between associations to different coaching programs. They are all looking for ways for agents to add more value to the transaction. And I think we're going to see a buyer's agent kind of a revolution in terms of adding value. Either that or buyer's agency will be devalued. I think it's going to go in one of two directions, but I have a lot of faith that agents will work very hard to keep commissions. So I'm going to go with, I think there will be a revolution in terms of adding value, but I think that disruption period is going to be a little messier. And one of my biggest things that I lament in hearing about this is I think of who are going to be the winners and losers if this kind of change happens. And to me, the very groups that I think the current administration and the FTC and the DOJ are saying that they want to protect will be the groups that are hurt the most. First generational homeowners or would-be homeowners. I think that group would be hurt by these kinds of changes because they will have even less access to top representation. So I think it's going to be messier than Ed describes. I think there's going to be a weird transition period that might even last 3, 4, 5 years. And I think as an agent, be limber and kind of be ready to sort of be flexible in your business model, because there's also a lot of opportunities that come when the industry changes like this. So I think there will be some agents who really make some great business model decisions and are able to achieve a lot of success too. That's my rant.
Anything to add? Because I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, I realize I've been.
No, those are great comments. I'm actually really excited to hear the approach you guys are taking, because I do agree. I don't think you guys said something completely different. Ed's saying it's going to happen. You're saying it's going to be messy. I couldn't. How could it not be?
Yeah, I don't disagree with Stephen.
Yeah, I don't see how it's not going to be messy, right. Which is good for Ed and I, not necessarily good for everyone else. But I have a question, Larry. I'm going to pose it to you. Is I know that lawyers charge in different ways. And we charge either a flat fee for a service we're going to provide that we provided multiple times. We can charge by the hour if we're not sure, or we can charge what is commonly referred to as a contingency, which is a percentage of the successful conclusion of a case, right? That's the way you guys seem to charge almost all the time, is you charge a percentage of the successful conclusion, which then comes out of escrow. Do you see, in addition to the other kinds of morphing, the buyer side seller, maybe some more of an introduction into the marketplace of brokers and agents who charge in different types of ways?
Well, let me try to answer it this way. And this is somewhat similar to what we just talked about. because I think important, the listing agent, I think, is going to remain relevant. They are the concierge, they are the confidant, they are the ones. And if you look at that listing agent, when a homeowner goes to the listing agent, they typically receive a higher value. There's two types of areas that you look at. It's do you want quick or do you want market value? And so those are type of things that they look at. When we go over and shift to the buyer's representation, that they are relevant. I think they may be diminished, contrary to some other comments. I think that could diminish. But what is going to, in my opinion, going to show when we talk about compensation models is that buyer broker agreement is that should be used now. I think it's extremely relevant that it must, and evident that it must be used now, is going to morph into something even more detailed. And you're going to then secure a buyer who wants your representation, and you're going to treat that contractual arrangement similar to the attorneys, that you're going to either do that on a contingent or you're going to pay me a flat fee. There are other states and other cities that this happens already, such as New York has different models on how they do it, especially when they're doing leasing. They pay the buyer, or the tenant will pay their agent. Now you're going to, I think that is going to come into play more and be more into the marketplace, and that model will come in a very short time frame.
I know that Ed and I will be very, very happy if somewhere down the line, someone makes the buyer representation agreements, one of them at least, mandatory on the buyer side. I know just from a practical standpoint, the idea that you have an arrangement with someone to whom you owe a fiduciary duty, and yet you have nothing in writing with that person is unbelievably shocking to me, particularly in light of the mandates of Article 9 of your Code of Ethics. So I just hope that you're right. I believe that you're right. So again, Ed, any further comments before we jump into something maybe a little less complicated? This would be a great topic for the rest of the day, frankly, but we do have a couple of other questions, about 17 of them from what I can tell here. So what do you got to say, Ed?
So just to kind of, just because things are changing doesn't mean that's bad. There's an aspect, and now I'm going to throw my Ed Zorn, who's a buyer broker, hat on. There's a certain element where I would love to negotiate my own fee with my own buyer directly. I happen to think I'm pretty good at this thing called real estate. And why am I, with a law degree, 20 years of brokerage experience, mediator, the skills that I have, why am I paid the same as a buyer rep as some guy who just got his license last week? Right? I feel like with my skill sets that in representing buyers, I might be able to command a fee more requisite for my skill set on the buyer side than maybe what's being offered to me by some contract between a seller and their listing agent. And why, again, am I getting paid the same as someone who's brand new? So if I'm able to negotiate just like a lawyer would get to do, right, with my own client based on my fee structure, that may not be a bad thing. That like what Steven said, as far as the enhancement and value add and buyer agents getting better, right? Now here's a reason why it makes sense for me to be better at my craft, because I can command a more reasonable fee for what my services are. So there's some aspects of this. And also, by the way, one of the things that DOJ is really looking at, realize this completely eliminates forever steering, right? If the buyer pays the buyer's agent, there's no more steering, right? Your fair housing issues, all these kind of issues where I'm only going to show again, we're in a heavy seller's market now, but let's go back to 2010. right? When I was working with a buyer and I had literally in the city of Corona, 40 properties that met their criteria, right? In that environment, right? Don't think that the top offer of compensation isn't the first 5 that get shown, right? And so all of those issues now go away because the buyer's paying the buyer's agent directly, and you have a very clear fiduciary duty string also tied to that. So there could be some benefits to this model as long as the industry and the government doesn't screw up the concept that the buying side, I think someone had a question about this, right? When you're dealing in, I think Stephen addressed this, right? First-time home buyers, right? The younger generation, those getting into their first home, right? They need a mechanism to be able to finance the compensation that's going to go to their representation. They need good representation. They should get good representation, and it should be included in their loan amount, just like it is today. Because the reality is that's already buried into their loan dollars. That's already there.
And that's a concern that I've heard expressed by a number of people, including at the several retreats I've attended with these gentlemen. And that's that. And I know you've read the complaints, and I've looked at the complaints that have been filed, and the basic misunderstanding about how a lot of what you guys do goes on. But here's my concern: is that for someone like the 4 of us, frankly, we're going to be, let's assume all of us were just consumers, not necessarily in the business. We all have the wherewithal to hire Larry Black, Stephen Meade, and Ed Zorn. We have that ability. Right, but then if you don't anticipate how a first-time home buyer, a home buyer that maybe doesn't have the cash to cover the cost of a top-notch agent, are we now not creating a have and have not kind of an environment for the buyers in the marketplace, particularly at the first-time home buyer level? And it's not going to affect young people. It's going to affect perhaps people that are buying their first home who may be new to the country. So you're in essence, if you can't figure out the mechanism for financing those people, you're actually hurting the people that I think they're trying to help. And so I just wonder what your guys' thoughts are on that. And then we'll jump to another topic that's totally non-controversial, which is fair housing.
Well, you know, John, I mean, and Ed knows this because I've had this conversation with him. You know, everybody in this room primarily works in California. Well, except for Ed, I think. And
I still work in California. I just work other places sometimes also.
You know,
Ed
California
and I are of a higher being. We've made a move to Tennessee. You know, we all work in California.
There's kind of a saying among, economists that the market finds a way, right? And, in California, we allow commission rebates. So while you don't, as a buyer, you don't directly negotiate how much your agent is going to make, you do have options in California, right? Like there are high rebate representation options available. But one of the problems and the things that I'm frustrated with a lot of these DOJ and FTC issues is that they are being required to make policy based on a national idea. But I would argue that these markets can actually be very different in different states. There are states that do not allow commission rebates by law.
Tennessee,
and
no rebates here.
And so consumers don't really have a choice. Like their agent, who might be a total joke and has gotten their license last week and doesn't care and doesn't do anything, that agent will get paid the exact same amount. An agent who's gives them 1 hour of time versus an agent who says, I only have 3 clients that I work with at a time, right? And other states don't have that option. So the DOJ and the FTC, they have to look at these rules on kind of a national basis. And for a state like California, that in some of these ways tends to be more progressive, we also don't require you be a realtor member to receive MLS services, to be an MLS subscriber, right? That is a more transparent, open market as you were, but that's not true in all states. In fact, that one's not even true in most states. And
there's 4 that are in that category, Stephen, by the way. 4 states allow you to be a non-realtor and have MLS access.
So yes, you've got 46 states where you must, there's that level of bundling is its own little antitrust can of worms. And I think that's part of the problem is DOJ and FTC have to look at the big picture. And sometimes I think we kind of get the short end of the stick here in California because we don't have some of those economics competition level issues that they do in other states. We found our own way for buyers to negotiate buyer commission, the sort of back door. You get to pick an agent and, without mentioning any specific names. I mean, I think that, a lot of firms tend to price to, get volume and the amount of time that they spend, and that consumers have options in the state of California, but they don't in other states.
So, I'm going to take a question that came in, which is totally unrelated to fair housing, but I want to just, start answering some of these questions that are coming in. We had someone ask a question, and I know, Ed, you know the answer, and I think most people have an opinion, but can we also discuss listing agents requiring buyer's agents to cross-qualify before an offer is even presented? And seems to be a misunderstanding that you can do that. So Ed, I want you to comment, and I will tell you that in the new RPA, there is actually a place where not only can you indicate the type of financing, but you will attach. It's no longer going to be something that you default to 3 days after acceptance. You're going to either have to specifically elect that you aren't going to tell your seller how you're pre-qualified, pre-approved, or already underwritten, and then you're going to be able to check off that box and attach that letter with your offer. So that's going to be coming up on December 14th. So this question almost becomes moot at that point. But Ed, what are your thoughts on requiring pre-qualification, and is it a violation of anything in the MLS?
So two different words that mean a lot here, right? You cannot require that somebody get a loan through your preferred lender on the listing side. That is not permitted. We don't allow that in agent comments. We don't allow that in any kind of remarks, right? However, to cross qualify, right? So the seller, if the seller says, I want my loan person who I trust to look at the income levels and to give me, the seller, an opinion as to whether or not this potential buyer can actually get the loan that they've represented that they are approved for, yes, a seller can do that. And that's the seller's right in the seller doing due diligence in trying to decide, who do I want to select to be my buyer? Because I don't want to select somebody as a seller. I don't want a buyer who went out, said a couple of things on a telephone, got a pretty letter on some nice letterhead that they can qualify for my $1.5 million house, and there's no way the guy could ever close on that loan. Now, I've just wasted all of this time as a seller, time on market, all of that. So as a seller does have a right to say, hey, I do want you to cross-qualify. Now, they can't require that the buyer get a loan from that individual, right? But as far as qualifying for vetting the strength of that buyer, that is permitted.
And just
to add, Ed, too, like something that I've been seeing more of is sellers offering a financial incentive to use a particular lender. So home builders have historically done that quite often, but now I'm seeing it on resale transactions where they'll say there's a $2,000 closing cost credit, but that is contingent upon use of the seller's recommended lender.
In California, at least, you need to be really, really careful, because as Ed pointed, I actually had a defendant accusation, and what we had to show affirmatively, not just take our word for it, but we had to show affirmatively through evidence before they would stop the investigation, is that the listing agent who was forwarding or demanding that you cross-qualify with a particular lender did not receive anything of value. And anything of value today, the department is taking on as things like, gift cards could even be something about. So you need to be extra cautious that all you are doing is what Ed just suggested, is saying, look, I don't want to look at loans that can't close. I don't want to look at this stuff, but I'm not getting any benefit as the listing agent. And frankly, the only benefit that the cross qualifier is getting is the first access at potentially closing some deals. And from a broker standpoint. So you just gotta be really careful about that. You can do it, but and frankly, I'm not sure it's not a bad idea to do that, but certainly you got to be really careful about not putting any money or anything else of value into the system. So Larry, Steve? Go ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I was gonna say the other thing I was gonna ask, and this is a question that I've come up with, is if a seller is requiring that, do they have to require that of all buyers who are financed? So they're universally applying that requirement as to not be accused of discriminating, that only certain buyers are required to cross-qualify.
I would certainly recommend that be
Yeah.
the case. Again, from an MLS rule standpoint, we have no way of enforcing that, right? But
No.
certainly from a risk management standpoint, if you're putting any one person into a cross-qualifying category, you better be doing that, or at least all of the same kind of loans, right? Anyone who's maybe 5% down or under, right? Some kind of objective criteria that would drive a cross-qualification versus just some yes, some no.
I feel like
that's a problem.
I've had conversations with the attorneys at the Department of Fair Housing, and I can assure you that is 100% correct. Because once you start differentiating, you better have an objectively verifiable criteria for why you're doing that. Because again, same thing with the love letters and with all this other stuff, is that if there's any kind of a situation where it appears that, well, I'm requiring all people who just happen to be of color to cross qualify, but even by accident, not even meaning to do it, I'm not worrying about certain other groups. You open yourself up to a claim of discrimination in fair housing. And in your world, that means it going to the Department of Real Estate. Because if you're found guilty of discriminating, Article 10 of your Code of Ethics requires under NAR rule that it go to the governing licensing body. And in California, of course, that's the DRE. So be very careful about that kind of stuff. You just, you got to do everything the same. Larry, you had a comment? You wanted to make a comment?
Just to amplify that aspect, anytime you're putting any restriction, and we talked to our agents about any restriction on there, we have to make sure that it is blanket across, as we've just articulated. And the other item that you were talking about, when we talk about gift cards, et cetera, not only are we looking at financial institutions, we look at escrow, all of these that are giving gift cards, the recipient and the one giving the cards could have some repercussions legally on that, from my understanding. So we do want to be conscious of all of that. And give me a minute to digress back to, and just, I want to articulate one thing that Ed had mentioned, going back into the DOJ and some of those, is that the ones that typically get suffered in some of these restrictions are the less fortunate. And when we talk about FHA buyers, and we're pounding that affordability aspect in this environment, and those FHA buyers are being hammered when they now are going to possibly have to pay a buyer's broker to represent them when they have very little means in here, without some sort of financial change in the financial network in here. Going back at times when we did 100% financing and what have you. These things maybe need to look at if that comes into play on the buyer paying the broker.
So fair housing, another topic that seems to be getting an awful lot of attention lately, with good reason. Ed, I know that there's been a lot of push, even at the MLS level, to deal with some of these fair housing issues. Can you just give us a quick overview? We're not going to get into hate speech or any of that stuff today. I'm going to tell the members in a minute where they can get other information. But Ed, how are you dealing at the MLS level with the fair housing questions and the love letters and things like that?
So realize at the MLS level, we try as much as possible to stay out of the broker-client relationship and really try to manage our rules geared at the concept of cooperation between the agents. So that's really where our focus is. We do have a diversity committee that has met a number of times over the past year, looking at different aspects. Should we change field names, things of this nature? And the sense really was, if we're going to make any kind of change or do something, we want it to be significant, right? Not just do something on the surface. And so as a result, we have not looked at changing any of our names or our fields or anything like that. One thing we did roll out at the MLS level is a really quality down payment resources product, right? So that we've partnered with a national technology company that does a fantastic job. It's called Down Payment Resources, and it opens up on a per property basis a portal that you can link through and get all of the different kinds of down payment assistance that might be applicable for that particular property, all the way down to like a city or local, like even let's say one of your local realtor associations has some kind of down payment assistance, right? That would show up kind of in this list with links on how to go through, qualify for some of that. And it's geared towards, helping agents get additional resources and opportunities for their clients to get some down payment assistance and to get more people into more properties. So that's an example of something we did at the CRMLS level to try to enhance and open up opportunities for all individuals to get into housing. But that's really where we're going to focus as an MLS, is in the resources and data and information to help facilitate, these types of transactions.
You also have if I recall correctly, I have a copy of it here, and I think this is a CRMLS product. It's a fair housing words and phrases list.
We have kind of a red light, green light, yellow light kind of concept. It comes from, we look at all kinds of different sources. And one of the, with regards to what words you use inside of your property descriptions. One of the things that's challenging about that, though, is context matters, right? So that's something that we still evaluate at a human level. So we may have some mechanisms and some warnings during listing input that say, hey, are you aware that this word, may cause some problems on fair housing? So we have some tools available for you to stay out of trouble. But, context does matter, right? So using a phrase such as family room, right, doesn't mean it's an automatic fair housing violation. I think that's sometimes something our industry has to understand, that there is no simple, quick, easy, just, hey, you never use this one word and you're good, right? That we do have to have some freedom to use context and describe the reality of what's happening. And that's kind of how we view that, at the MLS level, by having human beings look through and manage, these property description reviews.
Okay. Steve, your thoughts on fair housing?
Yeah.
Larry?
So, we came up, right, and we talked about this as a board, because I think this is a real problem. This is about the middle of 2020, and I'm just going to share with you, around, I think, the middle of the year, I think it was Houston Association of Realtors or another Texas board decided to change the terminology in MLS from master bedroom to primary bedroom. And singer John Legend tweeted the following. I'm going to read it because it's good. Real problem. Realtors don't show Black people all the properties they qualify for. Fake problem. Calling the master bedroom the master bedroom. Fix the real problem, realtors. And I think we kind of took that to heart, that we didn't want to do things that were based around just the optics of improving fair housing. We wanted to do things that actually really meant a difference for fair housing, and that any of the changes we made, we didn't want to sort of waste goodwill on things that weren't actual goodwill to move the needle on fair housing. And I stand behind that policy as an MLS. I think a lot of us want to do something to help fair housing, and we have to show a little bit of restraint to not do things that really are kind of tokenism type changes. We wanted real meaningful changes. I think one of the big issues that we have in our industry is I still think, generally speaking, realtors are not aware of the protected classes. California. I got a text 2 days ago from a listing agent who said, for her exact words, seller received another offer but didn't like the person. He is waiting for the right family who will move in and make this their home. This isn't a text message, right? This isn't writing. This isn't even on a phone call, right? And I have a buyer who is a single woman, right? So, I think that's a challenge, right? Is that, like Ed said, there's not an easy way. It's not like we just apply word filters and flag everything. I think there needs to be a fundamental change in the understanding of the agents. Like you shouldn't wait for an MLS warning to tell you that this might be exclusionary language, right? Like you should understand what makes it exclusionary. So I think as an industry, if there's an area that we need to do some training and some work on, I think it's that. We shouldn't be relying on the MLS to be the arbiter of fair housing and descriptions. I think it shouldn't get there,
Larry, comment? And then I have a question that came in. I'm going to start bouncing to some of these questions that are coming in because, and then I'm going to make an announcement. But go ahead, Larry, your comments first, and then.
Yeah, fair housing seems to be a slow moving train, and especially in the education and getting out to the members on what this is. And there's so many aspects about it. We look at even at the DRE level, Department of Real Estate, every 10 years we revamp that testing aspect, and we're scrubbing that and making it more generic, if you will, from using he or she. We need to make it not use, very conscious of not using questionable terms in that. And I support what CRMLS has done in making meaningful changes without doing a knee-jerk reaction. And Stephen's already articulated it, that a lot of training needs to be done. NAR's put out various products, Fairhaven and some of these aspects, but they are slow in getting out to the members in here and getting the members to look at that. But I think this will continue and carry on. It's just a slow moving trend.
In talking to the Department of Fair Housing, one of these gentlemen made the comment, just do it the same for everybody. And that's really the key. When you look at some of the complaints that are coming in, the appraiser didn't appraise the property the same way when he saw pictures of a black family versus a white family. There was that one case that people are talking about. Then there's, the way you steer people to certain areas or all kinds of stuff. Bottom line, just treat everybody pretty much the same way for as long as you can. Obviously, there are going to be differences, but I think what we're talking about here is purposefully sitting down and saying, okay, we're going to use certain words and phrases because we're going to try and eliminate certain people or encourage certain people. We're going to use love letters to sort of code word certain things so you know that I'm the right kind of person for the neighborhood. I think that's where realtors are getting in trouble, frankly, from that.
I think it takes broker involvement as well. The broker has to see this as something that is a positive nature in their business and have their agents look at this and promote that. And I think that would be a help.
Again, we're going to probably do another fair housing symposium and talking to leadership. We did one last year. These two boards participated. We had 900 people register for that program. It was a tremendous interest, and hopefully people got a lot out of it because, again, there's so many fine points to a lot of this. Speaking of fine points, Ed, get a lot of calls, I'm sure you do lately, particularly at the association level, and I'm sure you do at the CRMLS level, regarding people saying, hey, wait a minute, I bought my house and now everybody in the world can have a photo of it, can go to a video of it. I want the MLS to take down that stuff, right? I don't want people, now that I own this house, to see what the bedrooms look like, to be able to literally case the joint off of what's on the MLS. Ed, your thoughts on how on what the actual law is, and then maybe these guys can comment on how they've dealt with it in the past.
Sure. So a couple things. Usually the first thing I remind people, and since we're talking to agents, right, one of the things to remember is anyone here on the line ever look at a picture and coming up with a valuation of a property or CMA? Anyone ever look at the kitchen or the master bathroom or the view? Right? We have to remember how absolutely critical photographs are to what we do. And there's actually a state law that CAR did an excellent job a couple of years ago getting passed with regard to some of these privacy concerns. And it basically says that as an MLS, we are not permitted to remove historical information for a period of at least 3 years. And for us, that means photos, right? So if something's inputted into the MLS database, we're not allowed to remove it for 3 years. So photos are an important component of what it is that we do as an MLS. That's the first point I usually make to people. The second is, I don't have your buyer's photos in the MLS. I have the seller's photos in the MLS. It's the seller who owned the home. It's the seller's couch. It's the seller's pictures. It's the seller's car in the garage. It's the seller who authorized and provided that opportunity and that permission to put those photos in the MLS. And it's the seller who then authorized those photographs to be pushed out onto the MLS and to the internet at large, not the buyer. So and it's always interesting to me when buyers say this, that they want everything taken off the internet, which, by the way, everybody, any human being who's ever used the internet knows is not even possible. When they're the ones who use those photos to decide to buy the house, right? So they bought the home knowing these photos are out on these thousands of websites, and now all of a sudden they mystically want us to yank them all down. So some great news, John, you've mentioned a couple times the new RPA, right? I believe it's in paragraph 25. CAR has added some language to strengthen these points that I just made. And the RPA now, the buyer in signing the RPA is agreeing that the photos will not be removed. And that's actually what it says, that brokers, buyers, brokers, sellers, listing broker, MLS will not remove the photos. That they can't promise to take them down off the internet, any of those type of things. So I'm looking very much forward to people utilizing the new RPA. So that's something that we can point to. And we generally try not to take photos. And now there is a very important exception, and that is, there is some state law regarding judges, DAs, and officers, as well as someone subject to some kind of restraining order, right? In those scenarios, we as an MLS will go ahead. What I have is two competing state laws against one another, right? One that talks about privacy of these individuals that are at high risk, and another one saying we're not supposed to take historical data out of the MLS. We defer in those cases to the protection of those individuals, and we will remove those photos in those limited circumstances.
What if I were to take my photos out of the MLS before you close? Would that be a way to solve my concern? Not all photos, obviously, but
well, you're arguably violating an MLS rule, right? We have a rule that says you're not supposed to remove information from the MLS. That's a rule on you as a listing broker, listing agent, right? So is that done sometimes? Unfortunately, yeah, but realize you're not playing well with others at that point, right? You're diminishing the cooperative nature of the MLS. You're destroying the opportunity for the next buyer who's trying to get a good appraisal in that neighborhood to see the updated kitchen, the great view, and the fantastic master bathroom remodel that had been done. Well, now that's all stripped away from that appraiser who's coming in a month later to appraise the property, right? That has a very big, impactful, significant issue.
Okay.
Right.
Steve, comments from a marketing standpoint, and Larry?
I agree with everything Ed said. He's pretty much right on. I don't think there's anything I can add.
Okay, same with you, Larry. You got something you want to mention?
No, I would say this, that yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that is an MLS rule not to remove information once it's put in. So there is a vehicle for a violation and can be brought from somebody doing that, or persistent removing those pictures. But it is done. We've seen it done. But it is a violation as far as in the real world and as a practitioner. I think the pictures are invaluable, but I do want to point out that we did have a discussion at NAR about things that might be and can be blurred if they are offensive, and should be blurred if they're offensive when you're taking those pictures. So we're not blinded to that aspect of it. And at the request of a seller, we will blur the pictures that are of themselves if they choose to do so. And so I do want to point out that does occur.
Is that a way to solve I had a question here about what about tenant occupied property and taking photographs that you intend to sell the property, but the property is being inhabited by a paying tenant. Now, I know in the new RPA, there's a whole new approach to dealing with tenants. And in fact, there's a whole new addendum that will be coming out with the new RPA. But in terms of the multiple listing service and the requirement that you take photographs, I'm guessing you have some tips or some thoughts on how you deal with the tenant occupied property.
Yeah, make sure you have a good lease, right? That gives you the authority to take pictures when you sell, right? Again, these are contractual relationships, right? And so make sure that's something, if you have a seller that might be doing that and you're representing them putting a lease together, make sure you have those rights. You take those interior photos, of a property if it is tenant occupied. I mean, the whole selling a tenant occupied property already has all kinds of issues with it, right? What do you do for the remainder of the lease and occupancy issues and showings? And so there's a lot there that a good agent needs to do to make sure that they're ready to sell a property that's tenant occupied. And one of those needs to be, permissions for photographs. And staying with the photo issue, John, just to let you know, CMLS is working on some technology solutions where ideally what we'd like to get to is where you can mark photos as quote private, meaning that, when you go to sell, if you mark them private, then they won't go out the door, right? Outside the MLS as part of the feed. But that is a pretty significant technological lift, right? Sometimes these things that seem like, oh, why don't we just do this? It's super easy to think about, but realize because of how data flows and the amount of data that's moving around, some things are easy to say and very hard to actually come to fruition in the technology world. But we are working on being able to deliver some kind of mechanism where you can mark, some of those important interior photos as private, and then they won't go out the door, post close, something along those lines. So we're trying to apply some technological solutions to this need.
Do we have a corollary, Ed, in the IDX agreements and the data licensing agreements that says if something's marked, they actually have to pull something after the listing closes if those were marked private? Or are those out there permanently?
Yeah, see, here's the challenge you have, right? Remember, under the NAR mandatory policies that CMLS is subject to, it requires us to provide the photographs to brokers who want to display those on their websites. That's one of the aspects of cooperation, right? So what you're talking about, Stephen, potentially could be an NAR violation from a policy standpoint.
Yeah, there's no differentiation on closed data versus active data in the IDX rules, is there?
No, in fact, the mentality is the reason they demand that the sold data be out there is that's something that you do as brokerage work. And so if you want to display sold information to provide that to your consumers, you're permitted to do that. That's the whole point.
And Ed, that's 3 years upon close, 3 years after the close.
Now that's the state law, correct?
1088.c of the civil code.
Correct.
So-
However, the MLS rule has no limitation on it.
Yeah.
So while the state law says 3 years, my MLS rule says you're not taking historical data out.
So I've got a question I'm sure you've never heard before, Ed, and nobody's had this conversation. This thing out there called clear cooperation, and then somehow connected to all that is the coming soon sign issue and the coming soon status. So
Yeah, I have no idea
one-
what you're talking about.
Yeah, apparently nobody does. So here's the problem is of course, people are still confused. Number one, about the difference between clear cooperation and coming soon, and then what the current status is of those two. And so if you could just give us a quick overview of what's going on. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to give each one of you a chance to sort of tell the people where you think things are going and any other issue that I might not have covered. And then we're going to tell them about some really important upcoming programs that the associations and the MLS are going to be offering. So Ed, what do you think about what's going on with clear cooperation coming soon signs?
So first off, I think the thing to keep in mind is they're not related. They're not the same policy. They honestly have nothing to do with one another. There are MLSs that every MLS that's an NAR MLS has the clear cooperation policy. And that's the policy that says within one business day of marketing, you're going to input the listing to the MLS for cooperation and compensation. Okay, that's the clear cooperation policy. And some MLSs have coming soon and others don't. Then there's the coming soon policy, which is a stack of rules around a status with different MLSs across the country having different kinds of rules. It's CRMLS, we have a coming soon status, can be there for 21 days. Days on market does not calculate. And the reason we don't calculate days on market is you cannot show the property, right? So that's why we don't calculate days on market. And there were many MLSs that had coming soon before the clear cooperation policy. In fact, some have been eliminating coming soons post clear cooperation. So these two policies honestly have nothing to do with one another. The only way they're related is the fact that putting a property into CRMLS in a coming soon status does satisfy the input for cooperation and compensation that is the clear cooperation policy rule. That's the only way they're related. Other than that, they're not related at all. So here's really the thing. If you're going to advertise, if you're going to market, if you're going to tell anybody about this property, it needs to go into the MLS either as active or coming soon within one business day. And if it's incoming soon, don't you dare show it. With those couple of little caveats, it's not really complicated at all.
Which is amazing because of the number of calls that come in and people trying to figure out how they can circumvent some of these rules.
Yeah, I didn't say circumventing the rule wasn't complicated. Circumventing the rule is very complicated, and I ain't going to do anything to help anybody figure that out.
One of the things that we've done recently is kind of really added some teeth particularly at the board level with these associations and Lori Smith, and in cooperating with you guys, and that is how we now enforce some of these rule violations. You know, the NAR now has a rule that the fourth citation in any given year, and I assume that's a calendar year, is automatically goes to the grievance committee. And then, of course, if you get an appeal or someone wants to appeal one of your citations, that is going to come to the association. And these boards wrote up a policy for how that's going to work. That is now a state policy. Seems to be working pretty well. You agree, Ed, or disagree?
Yeah, I've liked those policies. In fact, I'm just typing something to Jeff Smetana, our director of compliance, because I'm kind of curious to know how many of the 4+ hearings we've done. I think it's just a small handful. I don't think it's more than 5 or 6, but I'm going to try to get a real number. And I do like the review process, right? So that it does make it easier, very simple to conduct a review. You know, right now at CRMLS, we get around 3,000 reported violations a month. Okay, just to give you an idea of what we process at the CRMLS level. And we usually issue out less than 300 citations in a month. So we're usually right around just under or just over that 10% mark kind of for the year each month. So that means 90% of the time, when a violation or something is reported about your listing that's wrong, you don't get fined, right? You have to beg us for a fine. It has to either be one of the big items that everybody knows is completely wrong, or you have to not respond to our warnings. But if we do issue a citation, the review process is pretty simple, very straightforward, easy to accommodate, to ask for a paper review from one of our associations.
All righty, so we've got a ton of questions. I don't know if Lori, if you've got any that you wanted to make sure we covered. I think we've talked. Now, obviously, there's issues that we could be talking about with the state legislature, what's going on in California, and how that might impact transactions.
We don't have all day, John, for that.
I know. Well, there was only 2,000 new laws that went into effect in California this year, so that wasn't too bad. Christine knows better than I, but again, there's so much that what I want to do, number one, is I'm going to tell them about some programs that these associations are coming up with that Lori's put together and that we're offering. Ed, I know that there's probably a ton of programs that you're offering at CRMLS, and then I want to give you guys the chance to do closing. Anything at all that you want to talk about, mention, just we'll do that. So a couple of things real quick. There's a program coming up in early December. It's not a program at any association. It's actually being offered by the California Association of Realtors, and Josh, who is their IT guy, is going to offer a program on how you can make sure your website is ADA compliant. That's been topic of quite a bit of conversation. I know at the NAR level, I've attended a couple of meetings where that issue comes up a lot. I don't know, Ed, if you've heard a lot of conversation and you guys have ever had any comments on that. So again, if you're listening in and you're interested and you want to know how to make sure your personal website or your company's website is compliant, Josh will do a great job. I've done a program with him, and I want to say that's in early December. You can go to the CAR site. As Ed mentioned, there's a new RPA coming down the road. Not just a new RPA, but a new RPA with about 63 revised forms. There are also going to be about 20 some odd forms coming down the road. So you need to be taking RPA classes. Both of the associations being represented today are doing phenomenal work. A bunch of brokers at the Pacific West are doing seminars on multiple seminars every week. Tri-Counties is doing multiple seminars. Really great teachers. Ed Estes over at Tri-County is a professor over at San Antonio, a junior college, and of course, Barbara Betts and Stephanie Gold. So I would urge you to do that. Do not wait until December the 15th to take a class, because Zippy will kill the current form and the new form comes out. And with the new form will come multiples of other new forms, addendums, disclosures, revisions to forms. So keep an eye on that. I know that Linda DiStefano and I are doing a program. We're going to be doing it coming up early next month. We're going to be doing some other programs. And then yours truly is going to be doing what we have come to lovingly refer to as a brown bag. All these other 25 questions that have nothing to do with the MLS, we're going to get together and I'm going to go through all that for 2 hours. That's coming up in a few weeks. And then we're going to also have a panel of the lobbyists from CAR talking about not only what legislation affects realtors that's passed this year, but we're also going to be talking about what's coming up in 2022 and where they see the legislative efforts being made to deal with the housing shortfalls and of course disclosures and all the rest. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and you guys got programs all over the place. I know that.
Yeah, if you go to crmlist.org, you can get a full kind of list of our training. We have trainings going on every single day. From our products, listing input, compliance, top 5 violation, So lots of resources, a very robust knowledge base, and we have a lot of things kind of on recorded webinar. We have some changes in our registered status. So if that's something you do as far as keeping property off the MLS for a period of time while you get photos or staging, realize we have made a change to our register status. So jump in. Again, some recorded classes that are great. It's very simple, very easy to use. It's probably only a 10-minute little video to watch, and you'll be completely up to date on how to make sure you get your registered listings in.
Again, there's no shortage of educational opportunities at these associations or at the MLS level. You've got to understand that, and I don't know if Ed, if you agree, or Stephen or Larry, but in every meeting I've gone to of lawyers that represent you guys, either risk management on the litigation side or association risk management or CRMLS risk management, or just general conversations, there seems to be a growing concern that we're looking at some really potential spikes in litigation against realtors because of a lot of the things that have happened. Otto Katrina, who is the new fabulous president of CAR, made a comment that I think, Stephen, you and I overheard, that 43% of buyers in California over the last period of time, I'm not sure how long this goes back, have expressed remorse in their purchases. Even if that number is 50%, you're talking about 2 out of every 10 buyers are not happy with the fact that their contingencies were waived and things of that nature. So you all need to understand that education today is critically important to protect yourself and your clients from all sorts of bad things. So with that, I'm going to go in a different order this time. I'm going to ask Larry to comment. I'm going to ask Steve to comment, and Ed on anything that they want to talk about regarding the multiple listing service. And of course, we're going to give you all of 5 minutes to do that.
But let me say, I'll start off here with a couple of things that to talk. There's so much in from just handling the brokerage aspect of it here. Clear cooperation, as we talked about, there's lots of questions that come from that. And just to point out that we do have information on the CRMLS website. And one of the documents that clearly points out how that that coming soon aspect clearly points out how that works is under the seller's instruction to place the listing into CRMLS. That clearly tells both the agent and the seller what's going to happen and how that's to proceed. The other item is I agree with what President Otto Katrina had talked about, and it is a concern that this litigation could be coming. And I think one way to protect ourselves from that is to make sure we're talking to the buyer, make sure that we're informing them on the compensation, which it clearly states that we are to do that. We've instructed them on how this all works. And not only that we also explain to them when we are putting that buyer or a seller is asking that a buyer waive certain aspects, whether it's inspections, whether it's appraisals, whatever that is, be clear and keep your good notes on, I did tell them this, and this is what we decided. And make sure that you have that for your protection and the seller and everyone else as well. So thank you for the closings. Thank you for inviting me here.
Larry, thank you. Don't leave yet because we're not quite done. Okay, Stephen, your comments, thoughts. I know that you've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people lately, and something that might crop up in your mind.
I'm going to start off this by saying I think we all have things that we complain about with the MLS and the way the system works, but the reality is this is probably one of the best things that exists in the world of real estate the world over. Routinely, people from other countries come here because they want to see how our system works. We have a property repository of data that is controlled by the industry for everyone's benefit. Not only that, and while we don't always succeed in this, I think we try very hard to remember that there is a buyer and a seller in every transaction, and our system is not weighted one way or the other. We try to keep that system neutral and we have control over it. I'm afraid that because we haven't been willing to invest monetarily until recently, because we haven't been pushing to innovate, because even MLSs haven't always cooperated with each other, that we're at risk of losing that system that we've created that really is, on the whole, pretty great. So I think we've got a lot of things changing. You know, when I think of my fears for the future, I think, what if that goes away? What if we're not able to maintain this as an industry resource, you know, by and for the industry? And secondly, what if we make changes that reduce the relevancy of buyer's agency? In most other countries, buyer's agency doesn't really exist. You know, if you're a first-time home buyer, good luck. You are thrown to the wolves. The seller's agent has no fiduciary relationship to you or fiduciary responsibility to you. And I don't want to see that go away. I have a lot of faith in the industry to adapt to these changes that we've been talking about. I saw with listing agents, there was this, you know, this revolution of adding value to the transaction. And I think buyer's agency is going to go through the same thing. You know, you're going to go to a Tom Ferry event or a Brian Buffini event or an association event, and you're going to hear about how a business model worked with these coming changes, and people are going to take and emulate those pieces. So I actually think the future of agents being at the center of the transaction is very bright, but understand things are going to change, and we're going to have to learn how to pivot as an industry and keep our eyes and our ears open. But, you know, like I said, I actually think the outlook is pretty good.
Ed?
Yeah, I think the biggest phrase I could say right now is that cooperation is king, right? We've been very used to cooperation and compensation being together, and that compensation perceived as a big part of what the MLS is. But when we really look at the time that we spend inside the MLS, providing technology, information, additional resources we're attempting to develop, almost 95% of what we do is all geared towards enhancing that concept of cooperation, right? Compensation is just one number in one field. That's it, right? And the MLS is fine without it. Like what Stephen alluded to, right? This concept of coming together on both sides and having representation for both the buyer and the seller. That is only known in the United States, right? We're the only country, us and Canada, are the only places where this is even a concept. And everybody wants the ease of transaction of what we have. And, you know, I would encourage people to go back and occasionally, I do this every year, right? Read the preamble to the Code of Ethics and understand and have an appreciation of what you do is important. It's important to the country, not just in providing a paycheck, not just for feeding your family, but what you do is important to our civil society. And we need to make sure politically and that we defend those benefits to the country. And that means getting involved in the political side, right? We are going to be under attack from the FTC and DOJ, predominantly from people who don't know how our industry runs, right? And we need to have, as an industry, a seat at this table to solve this perceived problem. And if it's recognized as a problem, that's fine. Then we need to be part of the solution to solve that problem. I think one of the worst things we can do is say there is no problem, everything just needs to stay as a status quo, and fight for what we've always done. I think that's a losing game. I think it's time to acknowledge that it's okay to modify how compensation works, as long as it's modified in a way that is positive for the consumer, so the buyer can still get good representation, that representation is still paid for and wrapped into a loan like it is today, so that there can be two sides of the transaction with quality representation.
This was phenomenal, and I didn't have to rant at all.
Mhm.
So thank you, guys. First of all, I want to thank you for your time. I know how busy all three of you are, particularly, well, not particularly, all three of you. Ed, I know how busy you are with all the things that you're involved with, and Larry, you're on vacation, for goodness sake. And this is the kind of man that Larry is, to take time away from Hawaii of all places, just to, and it's what, 8 o'clock, I guess, in Hawaii right now. So to be able to do that, and of course, Stephen, you as well, with all the things that you do, continuously servicing the membership. I think as an observer of the industry and also as a defender of it, I look and I think to myself, now is the best time. And frankly, if anybody ever wondered why do I join a realtor association? Why do I join an MLS? Based on what's going on now with all these systemic changes and all this stuff coming at you, now is the best time to be a realtor, because other people are taking care of this. And so if you're not happy, raise your hand instead of pointing fingers and volunteer to do some stuff, number one. And number two, and I guess I can say this and I won't feel self-serving, write a check. You guys have a political arm that's second to none. And frankly, as Ed just pointed to, you better have a seat at this table or you're not going to have a table. And so I think you need to be aware that, as Jess Unruh said in California, back when all three of you were in grammar school, money is the mother's milk of politics. And frankly, it doesn't work without it. I know that the political people are having a meeting here in Nashville in about a week, if I'm not mistaken, and they're going to be setting out some policies and some strategies, but it's going to come out to you guys cooperating and putting together some money. So I believe, Laurie, I'm not sure, but I think that was our last rant of the year. We've got a couple of other programs, and then we'll start off with 2022 and a brand new RPA. So if you haven't taken a class yet and you can't get in one, find one, because the new RPA is significantly different along with the form. Ed, thank you so much. Stephen, thank you so much. Larry, thank you so much. Lori, for allowing us to put all this stuff together. I think we're done.
We're good. And if we didn't get to your questions, we'll get to them at the next meeting.
I'm going to be taking a list of all these questions, and I'm going to be going through them for the brown bag, which is coming up in about a week or so. And then if they're related to the RPA, Linda DiStefano and I are going to do a program for on the new RPA, and we'll make sure we get those RPA questions answered as well. So with that, thank you guys, and have a great day.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you all.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye.
Talk to you soon.